and gentlemen, good evening. I'm seeing you file in. Whoa, we've literally just hit go and 133, 155 guys are piling in. What's happening, people? My name is Swarzy and welcome to Quarantine Question Time, hosted by My Life My Say, where we have tonight some very incredible and special guests. You already know who is on the flyer, so I'm letting you know from now. Grab your snacks, grab your drinks, grab all your lockdown snacks and your refreshments because you are in for a treat this evening. This is a very special Quarantine Question Time, and I cannot wait to introduce to you our very special guests. As we wait for those who are, yes, I can just see the notification that we're also streaming live on Facebook, who are joining. We've got a lot of people welcoming in. So yeah, I'm gonna wait for guys until we hit maximum capacity, and then we're gonna launch tonight. So thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Swarzy, and you are locked in this evening to a very special Quarantine Question Time. Tonight, we have got two, not even one for you, but two very special guests, and I'm gassed. So I know you guys at home are gassed. I can't wait to be chopping up all things COVID-19, racial equality, climate change, vaccinations, you name it, we're talking about it tonight. Tonight is a very special event for young people, by young people. So grab your snacks, grab your drinks. We're going to give you about 20 seconds because I'm feeling generous before we kick things off. Okay, Mete is like, nah, give them a minute, Swaz, give them a minute. He's in the chat, he's the man behind the plan. So yeah, there's a minute to go until we kick things off. Want to shout out Ashley Peters, who is signing amazingly and waving as well. We want to make this event as accessible as possible tonight. So many of you got in touch with your questions, and that is really how we've structured tonight. We've bounced off your ideas, we've bounced off your questions to put together what we hope and believe is going to be a really great conversation. So thank you for locking in. You've got about 30 seconds. Go to the toilet, make that cup of tea, get your snacks, get whatever you need. You're locked in for about an hour or so for Quarantine Question Time, hosted by My Life My Say. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, just your final call. Welcome to My Life My Say's Quarantine Question Time, the digital space, the brand new space to chop up all things with experts, MPs, young people when it comes to what really matters in the lives of young people, right? My name is Swarzy. I'll be your hostess with the mostess tonight. It's all in partnership with the wonderful My Life My Say, who is always opening up the conversation for young people to engage with politics. And so we're going to go in about 10, 9, 8. I really need that countdown clock. That dun. But Mete's in the back saying, yeah, we can go. If you've just joined us on Facebook, welcome. For you guys in Zoom, we're with you tonight as well. A couple more seconds, and then I believe we can kick things off. Cool. Well, if you've just locked in, welcome and good evening. There is no other way to spend your Thursday night than right here on Zoom. On Zoom with me, my name is Swarzy, and you're locked in to Quarantine Question Time, a very special episode, a very special event with some very special guests tonight as well. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Quarantine Question Time last year kicked off and launched against the backdrop of the pandemic, launched across everything to do with lockdown as well. And it was the hub really where we wanted to bring young people together to have a conversation that everyone was talking about but may not feel as though they were heard or listened to. And that's the key for us at My Life My Say. We really want to have good conversations and hear what young people are saying. So if you've just joined us for the first time on Zoom, on Facebook, welcome. My name is Swarzy. And I just want to say from the jump, if you are not politically wired, if you are not too sure about the political scene, don't worry, this event is for you. This event is manageable, it's digestible, it's exactly for those on either side of that camp. And so if it's your first time, welcome. Please follow us on the socials at My Life My Say on Twitter and be part of the conversation. All of tonight has been really constructed around your questions, your tweets, your ideas. And so we've put down this conversation by you guys, really. So we're glad that you've joined. You can use the hashtag #QQTStarmer, which is giving you a little plug as to who the special guest may be, as we'll be following this live for all of your questions and your comments and making sure that's part of the conversation as well. So before we kick off things tonight, I want to introduce to you the man behind the plan. I would like to invite to you Mete Koban, MBE, the CEO of My Life My Say, to say a few words about this evening and to kick tonight off.
Thank you, Swarzy. I always wonder how I'm going to follow your energy on these. But no, massive thank you to you and for being an amazing host. It's been a journey since we launched this last year in April. Feels like a lifetime ago. You know, we've had thousands of people who've engaged with our platform. But look, I want to say, just on behalf of My Life, I say massive thank you to all of our attendees who've joined us today, all of you who've supported our journey over the past year and years. Actually, you know, we've grown tremendously over the last couple of years, and you know, our aim is there to really make sure that we're engaging young people's views in politics, making sure that young people are at the heart of decision making. And we know that's important because, you know, sadly, we're going through a very difficult time with COVID. It's affected young people's lives in so many different ways, you know, from their financial well-being to their mental well-being to their jobs to, you know, their families. And, you know, it's a very, very stressful time. And even myself, you know, I think in the third lockdown, you know, it's a different experience to the first and second lockdown. So, you know, I can only imagine what so many people are going through. And that's why we're saying, as an organization, it's really important that young people are involved in the recovery process, or even in the process about what are we doing next, because too often our voices are forgotten. You know, everyone always talks about the business community. People talk about, you know, so many different groups in society, and rightly so. No, this isn't, you know, me trying to pitch young people via other groups, but, you know, too often our voices are neglected for one reason another. And, you know, that's why we're very grateful to all of our supporters who've been engaging with our platform, because it's important that we're making sure that, you know, young people's voices are at the heart of what we're doing. So, yeah, just a quick plug for everything we're doing at My Life, My Say. These quarantine question time sessions will continue. It's a non-partisan platform. So although today we're joined by, you know, Sir Keir Starmer, who's the leader of the Labour Party, we will be doing this with other leaders. We've actually had Sir Davey on before from the Liberal Democrats. We've worked with the US State Department and the US Embassy in London to promote the US elections in the UK. We were the only organisation to do that during the elections, and that was quite an election, Swarzy, as you remember as well. So we will continue doing what we can to make sure that we make politics more accessible. And today is a step in the right direction. You know, we're trying to bring the world of politics and the world of, you know, bringing people on like Swarzy and like Munya, who you'll meet in a second as well, who make politics more accessible to young people, because we know that there is a lot of us out there who are interested in the issues that matter, but don't necessarily see traditional forms of politics as a vehicle to address those issues, partly because, you know, many of those processes are outdated, and also who wants to spend their Wednesday afternoon watching, you know, Prime Minister's Question Time. No offense to our politicians, but it's not the most engaging platform for many of our generation. So this is part of our attempt to make that happen. Make sure you follow at My Life, My Say. Otherwise, my comms manager will, you know, get onto me for not saying that. But listen, have a great event. And again, thank you to our guest speakers, Swarzy, to you, and for everyone to making this happen.
Thank you, Mete. He's so humble, isn't it? He's too humble. He's too nice with it. But Mete, we have to give you props now. Thank you so much, yeah, for really pulling together, and the whole team at My Life, My Say, pulling together an event like this tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've just locked in, welcome. My name is Swarzy. You are joining us for a very, very special quarantine question time. And without further ado, let me introduce to you our very, very special guest of the evening. If I was on stage right now, I would be going wild. I'd be running up and down the stage and I'd be doing a drum roll. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you your first guest of the evening. It's the one, it's the only, it's everyone's favorite comedian. Munya Swarzy is in the building. And there he is.
Here I am in my little Hoover cupboard. I can see there's 893 people watching, which I think is about 10 viewers more than Swarms' live. So happy with the figures.
Munya, how are you, man? How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I've had a very domestic day today. I've got the dishwasher on the go. I've got the washing machine on the go. So you know, ladies, get you a man who can do both. Am I right?
Everyone's in the chat like, yes, he's right. He's right. Yeah. Munya, it is a joy to have you. So you know already, gang, yeah, you know that this conversation is going to be like no other. So Munya's in the house. And second of all, it is the one and only, we have to introduce to you Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the opposition, the Labour Party. Welcome back here. It's so good to have you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Swarzy. That's brilliant to be back. Munya, thanks for joining us this evening. And Swarzy, I can't believe it must be several months since we last did this on one of these question times. And it was absolutely brilliant last time. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And thanks to Mette and the team for putting it together. Really. And Swarzy, I remember from last time, you're absolutely in charge here. So I will keep to my time, keep to my topic. I won't go off topic, and I won't take too long. I think last time you muted me and moved me on a couple of times, which is...
I've been taking away that power. I don't have the mute power anymore, so Mette will be in charge.
Got to give Swarzy the mute power. So, but anyway, it's brilliant to see you and to be back doing this event. Really enjoyed it last time, and tonight's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, tonight really, really will be brilliant. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you've just looked in again, this event has been really structured, really put together because so many of you have sent in your questions. So don't worry, I'll be hurrying on. Sir Keir is just going to be like, yeah, come on. We need to get to every one of these questions that these young people have put in. And so thank you to everyone who is locking in tonight, whether it's Zoom or Facebook, wherever you're joining us. It is so good to have you. So let me run through some of the ground rules so that we're all on the same page, because tonight needs to work in harmony. So if you're a newbie to Zoom, we've been in lockdown for how long now? I hope you're not a newbie to Zoom, but there are some functions at the bottom of your screen, and one of them is raise your hand. So throughout this event, you will have the opportunity to make your own comments or ask your own questions. And in order for us to conduct this in a very fair way and to allow everyone a voice to be heard, you will need to indicate the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen so we can call you up and you can have your say. But if you don't want to speak, that's absolutely fine. We've also got the Q&A function. So if you prefer to write your question in the chat, write it down, jot it down. Me and Munya will pick it up and we'll throw it into the conversation as well. And third, something very exciting, another function is live polling. So we'll be practicing democracy in action by giving you the opportunity to vote at this event. There'll be a pop-up on your screen, and I hope in good timing, one will come up very shortly. And all you'll need to do is vote from whatever option, or maybe there's an above all option as well. And we're going to collect all of the votes and come back to the end of the event and share what you guys have said. So I hope, Munya, that this live polling is good. Hey, as if on time.
Okay, cool.
So over to you. Let us know, what are we voting for?
Okay, so today's poll, I should have brought my monocle, is how has the latest lockdown affected you? So you can pick from my mental health, my finances, my social life, my relationships, my job, or other. So I'm guessing you just put a little tick in the box that applies to you most, and then we'll find out what has been affected most in lockdown number 276.
Yeah, 3.0 feels very different to the first lockdown for so many different reasons. And I guess, Keir, I'd love to come to you first because we're human, right? And it would be really, really interesting just to hear from your perspective, this third lockdown, of those options, which one has affected you the most? But two, which one do you think will rank the highest among young people?
I mean, for me, this one's definitely been much harder. And I think that's the same for a lot of young people. The first one was the first time we had it, and it was, you know, we knew roughly how long it was going to be. The second one was, I think, 4 weeks. This one, I think, there was something about the feeling that by Christmas we'd be turning a different direction, then suddenly it turned away again, and we're back in it. And lots of people have been saying to me that they've really struggled with this one, including actually lots of young people in Camden. We've had a number of Zooms with young people through this, and I mean, maybe this is just me, but I wasn't expecting young people to be quite as affected as they have been. And I was really struck with how many people are really, really struggling with this one. So for me, it's definitely this one. And I just really, really want to see human beings again in the flesh. I know it sounds an odd thing to say. I went in Stevenage, and Swarzy, I won't take too long, so just listen, I know I'll have to finish. I went to Stevenage to one of them. There's a mass vaccine centre there, which was really fantastic, that I went to last week. And there were lots of people coming in, older people, to be vaccinated. And there must have been about 100 people in the room, coming in really anxious, going out with a real smile. And I realised I hadn't seen human beings in the flesh smiling for a year. And it was a real reminder to me as to, you know, I had to take a minute for myself in that, to say, gosh, Keir, you've missed human beings. And so for me, it's definitely this one. I don't know what other people think, but it's definitely this one.
Yeah, it's such a good point. We miss human interaction. We miss seeing people face to face, don't we? I think actually that, Munya, you've got a clone, because I don't know how something comes out and then you've already put together a video. So I want to know from you, what has your experience of 3.0 lockdown been like? And what do you think actually is going to rank the highest among young people? Of these options, which one do you think is going to be number one?
I mean, I think lockdown one was like this whole, it was like this never ending joke amongst people that, oh yeah, it's going to be over next week. You know, there was like a certain novelty because we've never experienced anything like it before. You know, all of the group chats saying that they're going to lower a massive lasagna into Wembley Stadium. Like, you know, it felt like it was just, no one could believe what was happening. And then it sort of happened, and then everyone was in it together, and there were so many memes and like Zoom raves and stuff like this that it kind of flew by a little compared to lockdown 2, which then happened around Christmas. That was tough because, you know, I hadn't seen my mum the whole year. I hadn't seen my dad. I hadn't seen my little niece Luna. And yeah, man, I've been having to put so much money in the Christmas cards just to claw back all of that time that I haven't been able to see her. But yeah, this third lockdown, you know, even for me, I think the first time it happened, there was so much to talk about. But even I get tired of writing songs about, you know, tier systems and Zoom and, you know, being in lockdown. Even I'm bored of it. But I think the only thing, you know, I'm just grateful that in our demographic, in terms of just young people today, there's so many creators, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, anything, so many creators, because, you know, on the days that I don't have any laughter in me, someone else takes the baton and then we pass it back to one another. So I am very grateful for that. Even though it's hard, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I don't have an earpiece, but if I did have an earpiece, someone would be screaming, tell Munya how much we love the fact that he's kept us going in lockdown 1, 2, and 3. So thank you so much for the joy. Oh my gosh, the joy you have brought us. So yeah,
You're welcome. Thank you.
Add Munya's name at the bottom just to say who's really kept you going through these lockdowns. So this is your poll tonight. How has this latest lockdown affected you? You can see those options. Please vote. We're going to come back at the end of the event and take in all of those votes. And it's great to have Keir as part of this conversation as well, because it's an indication of where young people are at. We want to hear your voices. And so yeah, make sure you're voting, and then we're going to come back to the end of the event and reveal those results. So as you know, tonight is a big conversation. Me and Munya, we're in conversation with Keir Starmer, and we want to be talking all things that you've been asking questions about, from COVID to vaccinations to climate change to racial equality. There is so much to get through. So I'm going to hand over to Munya next to kick off the conversation and start us off with the first question of the night. Okay, so
Keir, you've allowed us to call you Keir as opposed to Sir Keir, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Good.
I've been called Keir all my life, and it's worked really well.
Okay, great.
I've been called a lot worse than Keir, I have to say, but Keir's good.
Okay, well, I insist on being called Sir Chihuahua, just going forward for everyone. Okay, so Keir, my question, it sort of comes before all the actual questions we want to ask, but I guess it's a question about, you know, who are you realistically in terms of, you know, how do you define yourself? I think being in lockdown, it means we see a lot of you on the news, we see you in PMQs, but it's very different from being out and about and getting to meet young people. You know, if you think about during, you know, when Corbyn was kind of the leader of the opposition, we would see him on stage at Glastonbury. We'd even had events like, you know, Grime for Corbyn, where it was sort of musicians coming out in force to support. Obviously, there's a little bit of disconnect there because politicians can't really be out and about at the moment. So I guess I just want to know, even personally, a little bit about what you stand for. You know, you've used the term socialism, but what is that definition to you?
Look, Munya, thank you very much. And you're absolutely right. The fact we can't get out and about means that it's very, very limited like this. Look, I mean, I live in Kentish Town. I've got 2 young kids, and I'm out and about here all the time. I love football. What I believe in is equality and dignity, and I've devoted my whole life to advancing and protecting human rights across the world. And so I've worked here in the UK on lots and lots of human rights issues. I then went and worked in the Caribbean because they have the death penalty there, as you may know, which I think is an abhorrence. I think it's grossly unfair. So we went out to the Caribbean for a number of years to work out there on that. That then took us into Africa on death penalty issues. So dealing with human rights, equality, dignity to me is probably the most important word in human rights, dignity of the individual. And that has driven me, a sort of sense of wanting to improve things. It's why I went into politics, to change lives for the better. The gross inequality we've got in our society has been there for a very, very long time. It's got worse, I think, in the last 10 years. And we need to do something about it. And obviously now I'm leader of the Labour Party, and I'm absolutely determined that instead of talking about changing things, we need to get in a position where we can actually change things by winning an election. But it's that equality and dignity and a real hatred of injustice that drives me. But, you know, whatever I've done, you know, I came from a family of 4 kids. My dad was a toolmaker, so he worked in a factory all his life. And my mum was a nurse, and therefore I was lucky to get to university. I was the first in the family to get there, and to go on to do some of the things I've done, which has been brilliant along the way.
Okay, cool.
Oh, go on, you go.
Oh no, I was just saying cool. I wasn't much of a contribution.
No, I just got to come off the back and say, yeah, it's really it changes a lot of perspective, doesn't it? When we know, you know, if your mum is familiar with the NHS, worked at the NHS, and I believe your wife is also working at the NHS. And so I just wanted to know, what has COVID been like through the lens of having loved ones working in the NHS? Has that changed your perspective in any way, shape or form?
Oh, I think it does, because firstly, my mum was a nurse, which you know, and was absolutely devoted to the NHS. I mean, it was the strongest thing in many ways in her life. She she was actually very, very ill for much of her life as well. She had an illness called Still's disease, which in the end meant that she couldn't walk, she couldn't move or eat, and in the end had to have her legs amputated and that sort of thing. And so she would, if you like, the NHS was her livelihood, and then it became a complete lifeline. And so that was quite intense for me. I spent a lot of my times when I was a teenager and a young man in high dependency units, actually seeing the NHS actually, you know, saving my mum's life. Quite incredible. My wife now works in the NHS, which is fantastic. So she's been working through this pandemic, and what that's given me is a real sense of just how understrained the NHS is at times, because she obviously comes back and tells me what's going on in the team, what the staff are saying, how they're under pressure and all the rest of it. My sister actually used to work in the NHS as well. She's now works in a care home, but she was in the NHS for a while. So we've got a very strong personal relationship with the NHS, which I think is just fantastic. What I see in the NHS is people working not just because it's a 9 to 5 or whatever the job is, and not just for the money. It's something inside that what makes people. It's about health and other people, and it's an incredible thing. So I feel very, very close to the NHS, and it was obviously created by the Labour Party and will always be deep in the hearts, I think, of all of us. But I mean, it is humbling when I go in, pick my wife up from the hospital, to see some of the staff and what they're doing and what they're giving day in, day out. It is humbling.
Okay, so Keir, I want to jump in. So a second ago, you sort of mentioned, you know, as the leader of the Labour Party, potentially one day as Prime Minister, something important to you or your kind of core value system is to do with, you know, equality and there being sort of fairness and dignity. So with that in mind, if you were to become the Prime Minister, realistically, it is a huge balancing act, because you know, anytime there's something like what's going on at the moment, where the government is pumping money into the economy via something like the furlough scheme, obviously the government racks up lots of debt, and then it becomes a case of repaying it in a way that doesn't then destroy recovery. So obviously when Cameron was in power, the debt was being repaid too quickly, which is why we sort of had austerity and sort of more cuts. And that is why the worse off were actually sort of affected the most. So in this instance, of course, we are racking up debt via things like the furlough scheme. If you were to come into power, you know, how quickly would you aim to pay off the debt, but also making sure that you keep that equality afloat?
Well, Munya, the first thing I'd say is, don't make the mistake we made in 2010. after the financial crash, which was to think that the way through this is to go for austerity and really severe cuts to public services. That was a complete mistake, in my view. It stripped away our public services, stripped away our local authorities and what they could do, increased inequality massively. And I was running a public service when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, taking massive cuts. Wrong approach. And I think not only did that create a lot of inequality and make inequality a lot worse for people, it also didn't allow the economy to recover. And it put us in a bad position to start this pandemic. So the answer to the question is, I think you've got to build and turbocharge your economy rather than cut with austerity out of this. And there's a lot of thinking now that the old argument that you need to just balance the book as quickly as possible just isn't right anymore. But for heaven's sake, let's invest things, let's turbocharge the economy, and not make the mistake of the last 10 years, because I think it was a huge, huge mistake. And actually, many young people have paid the price for that. Right. Many young, if you look at what's happening now, tragically on the back of the pandemic, which is people losing their jobs, etc., it's very often young people, because they're people in insecure employment. They haven't got the security that others have got, and therefore they're in this very, very precarious position. So obviously, we don't know what the economy is going to be like in 2024, but I think to go around that block again would be wrong. I'd be very interested, by the way, to hear what people on here have to say. And I don't know whether we can do this, Swarzy, but if people want to chuck comments in the Q&A, even if we don't get to them tonight, or in the chat, perhaps my team can fish the comments out and get a sense. So if people have got a view that they want to put in there, we'll fish it out and have a look at it.
There is one question that's just popped up, because I was also about to ask this. How do you actually, this is from Gillian Harrison, how do you actually turbocharge the economy? What does that look like?
Well, what I think we should do, first of all, is all the infrastructure projects that are built out for the next 4 or 5 years, we should bring them forward and we should put them into the green sector, carbon low sector. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, which is to rebuild the economy and deal what we need to deal with in terms of climate change, home conversion, heating, lots and lots of work that would be high skilled jobs in a green way, rebuilding the economy, but bring it forward. We did a report just before Christmas that suggested you could probably, I think, create about 400,000 jobs in the next 6 months to 12 months if you did that. That would be a huge opportunity for people who've lost their employment, particularly young people. And what a thing to be involved in, shoring up our economy, shoring up the way we live for the future in relation to climate change.
Yeah. And just to say thank you so much to Gillian, and even to you, Keir, to say yes, please put your comments in with the Q&A section and wherever else you want to comment and contribute, because I know that we did another session where some of the questions we couldn't get to, Keir, you were really kind enough to lend your time that way as well.
And I think, Swarzy, last time we did do some follow-on questions after the event where people,
So we'd love to do some of that as well, because I know we're not going to capture everything in this 1 hour for sure. And just to tie in actually everything, and just to go back to COVID and finish this section, and yeah, we'll move into jobs actually, because that's going to be another huge part of the conversation tonight. But lots of people have been asking, what are your thoughts on the fact that the announcement has come out that we have surpassed over 100,000 deaths. People have lost their lives to COVID-19. And this figure is not only just devastating and sad, but it's tragic. It's really tragic to think of all the ways in which it could have been prevented, and this number didn't need to be so high. And even for you to share, you've got family members, close people who are in the NHS, so I'm sure you've had that in your ear, and then seeing what's been going on with government. And so lots of people have been putting together these questions, and we've kind of put it together in one to say, if you were Prime Minister right now, what are 3 things that you'd be doing now that Boris isn't doing at the moment? So yeah, what are those 3 things that you'd be doing now that Boris isn't doing at the moment?
Yeah, the first one is we've got to act much more quickly. The big mistake over the last 9 months has been that the government's been too slow. They were too slow into the first lockdown, too slow into the second one, and they were actually too slow into this one. They waited 13 days before doing it. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is to Kickstart, which is the scheme for young people to get back into work. It's there. It's actually a good idea. It's the government's idea. I'm perfectly happy to say it's a good idea. but there's not enough people on it, enough people getting back into work, because as soon as we're through this lockdown, the economy and people's lack of jobs, etc., is going to be the next big story. And the other thing I'd do, this is a practical one, is I'm really worried about other variants, and I just don't think we're being clever enough on the border. Last time we closed direct flights from countries that we thought might be bringing the virus in, and in the end it came by other routes because people came indirectly. We're making the same mistake again. But that 100,000 figure is really awful. I mean, you have to pinch yourself to even believe it.
Squeeze out of that just as well, you know, we say that the government acted slow, but what is the justification for that? Lots of people are saying, well, how did you not act fast enough? How did that how did that happen if people who are not in positions of power, if we can detect those things, how come those in those roles can't do it? So what is the justification for acting too slow?
I don't think there is one. Well, what I would say in fairness is, look, it's a pandemic and any government would struggle, and it's not clever or smart of me to sit here and say, if we were in power, we'd have got everything right. We wouldn't. And in fairness to the government, you know, it is a struggle. It's been a struggle for all government. We've had 3 waves now. The first lockdown in March, the second one in the autumn, and now the one we're in. What I said to the Prime Minister in the summer is, look back now and acknowledge mistakes, and then you won't make them again. And he refused to do that. And what I think most of the public says, look, we'll excuse a few mistakes. Of course we will. We understand it's difficult. But what is inexcusable is making the same mistake twice, and even 3 times. And I think that has been a major problem. I mean, there were other mistakes which I think were pretty unforgivable. I don't think the government really got the care sector and care homes and the need for urgent action there. But I think it's the repeated mistake. I think that Boris Johnson has a problem giving tough. He wants to be popular and he doesn't like making tough decisions that people aren't going to like. And I think that's bound up with it. But I'm not going to sit and pretend that, you know, if Labour have been in power, or if we're in power today, that no mistakes were made. Of course they would. That's completely understand. And I think most people understand that. But that, you know, the 100,000, we've got to just make sure it's not just a number, because yesterday, I mean, I think, as far as you touched on it, we did a Zoom yesterday with family members of those that had lost someone through COVID, and it was about an hour and a quarter, and the whole team were in bits just listening to the stories. But it wasn't just the fact that someone had died; it was the fact that people had to tell their children, and you know, one person said the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was to have to tell my children what had happened to my husband, and it was, you know, absolutely difficult and you know, heart-rending stuff. And so behind it, you know, 100,000 is a big number, twice the number we lost in the Blitz, by the way. It's the size of Bath or something, but every single one is a family that's been touched by it. And I think part of the reason that young people have been affected much more by lockdown 3 is, you know, every single person who's died has got relatives, got sisters, brothers, mum and dads, you know, friends, neighbours, whatever it may be. It was really, really I don't know whether Munya and Swarzy, you've done a session with people who've lost someone, but it's an incredibly emotional and powerful thing. I'm really glad I did it, but I found it really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously I've had friends and family members who, you know, have been affected directly that way. I think it's important also to note that, you know, a lot of people are kind of, the thing with COVID is that it impacts more than it impacts all areas of life. And there was something that you were saying a minute ago that kind of, you know, triggered in my mind, something to do with university students. So I was asking lots of friends the kind of things that they'd want to ask. And I think uni students feel really hard done by at the moment, in the sense that they are essentially paying all of this money for a series of Zoom lectures. Now, you know, a second ago you said that Boris needs to make more, he needs to be better at making tough decisions. Where do you stand on a decision to, you know, say, for example, to either reimburse partially or fully university students who are paying the full amount at the moment? And also, given what we've said about, you know, the need for recovering, and I know you've said you won't make cuts, but at one point, late in 2019, Corbyn was even pledging to scrap tuition fees. So is that still possible? If not, will there be a reimbursement for uni students? Where do you stand on all of that?
Well, Munya, first thing I'd like to say is I think young people, university students have had a really, really hard time. Really, I mean, I think about when I was at university, it was all about being there, lots and lots of people living independently, etc., etc. I did a meeting 2 or 3 months ago now with students who just arrived at university, and they were all on the screen as we are, and they were stuck in their accommodation. They couldn't go out. Quite a lot of them had COVID. They were with people they hadn't met until 10 days before because they were first year students. And the only learning they were having was online in the bedroom around the corner from the kitchen that they were Zooming me on. And that is a million miles away from what you would expect a university to be like. On the situation at the moment, I think, and we've called on various, I think universities and certainly public sector student accommodation are beginning to reimburse students, quite rightly, for the accommodation, because some students are in a position where they're not even allowed into the accommodation that they're actually paying for. So the first thing when I do is to say to private landlords, do the same thing, do the decent thing and reimburse that. On tuition fees, I felt very, very strongly that one thing that benefited me greatly was not having tuition fees. If you come from a background or family that hasn't got a lot of money sloshing around, and this would be true of my family, people don't like to take on debt, and they're scared of debt. And there's huge, I mean, tuition fees is a huge debt for young people that they carry with them for a very long time. And that's why we rightly committed at the last election to get rid of tuition fees. It's not the only thing, by the way. I mean, there's colleges, there's non-university education, which needs to be completely supported as well. And I'm a big fan of saying all forms of education and further education are equal. And therefore, whatever we do with universities, it's very important that we always factor in those that aren't going to university but are learning in different ways. But I have to say, my heart goes out to
Sorry, there was a lag.
Sorry,
I was going to ask. So that is very much something that you would like to, that proposition which was made sort of late 2019 of scrapping tuition fees. That's still very much a priority for you yourself, is it?
Yeah, it is. I think it's very important that we. It's about how you see education. Do you see this as a benefit just for the individual who's being educated, or do you see education as something where if we educate people, that is a good thing for all of us? Because people are going through university now, going through higher education. They will be the NHS workers, the consultants, the scientists, whatever it may be of the future, and that's a massive benefit for all of us, rather than just seeing everything as a commodity for the individual.
Yeah, and Munya, you're so right. Like COVID is definitely affecting every area of everyone's life. And for so many people who was tweeting in and asking, I don't want to ask about tuition fees. And I'm thinking, no, people are right to ask. If I'm spending my coin here and I'm not in my uni halls and I'm doing my classes on Zoom, why am I paying big people money if I can't be accessing all of the education I would normally be getting, right? So these questions, if you're sending them in, please send them in. We've got the Q&A section coming in very, very soon. So we're going to whittle through some questions that have really come in as the bulk of what we want to be asking Keir Starmer tonight. And the next one really is around racial equality. And this has been huge. This has been an ongoing conversation. It is nothing new. And lots of people would love to ask and really know the answers behind the moment, through the fun that we had in the interview when you called the BLM a moment rather than a movement. And there was a lot of conversation and controversy around this. And so a lot of young people are asking, just take a step back. What was that? And do you regret your choice of words? So we just want to get into your head and understand the backdrop to that and really hear from you. What was that about for you?
Yeah, Swarzy, I'm really glad you brought that up, because Black Lives Matter, and it's really important that we all say that and we mean it. And there isn't any counter argument. If you don't believe Black Lives Matter, then you're just wrong, and we need to be strong about that. Obviously, this was the George Floyd incident, and you'll remember the ghastly footage that we all saw from America. And what I was talking about that, and because George Floyd was a terrible case, but it wasn't the only one. There've been plenty of other similar cases, and not just in America. Here we've had similar cases. We know about disproportionality. through our criminal justice system, through practically everything, structural racism. And I was being asked about particular features, and I just said, we've got to stand back from this and see it as a moment. What I meant by that was a historic moment, as something incredible, just as you might say, if you go and see something, say, wow, this is a complete moment. It's incredible. I completely understand why people may have read it differently, but what I meant was, let's not get hung up on little bits of challenge here, there, and let's see this for what it is, because what was coming through, I think, with Black Lives Matter then, and it's persistent, it's really good, is we can't just keep going on like this. We can't, George Floyd can't just be the latest case. Something's got to change. And I was trying to get that across, but a memo to self, use language which can't be misconstrued in any way when we're describing things. But what I was trying to get across was this is actually bigger than people understand, because structural racism is there, and we know that. And one of the things I'm really pleased about is that we have already committed to a Race Equality Act if we get into power in 2024. I'm very keen not to commit too much of what we're going to do in 2024 until we get there, but that was one that the team and I thought was very, very important. So if we have a Labour Party, a Labour government next time, that will be a major plank of legislation coming into force, and not before time. But Swarzy, I mean, I actually think if people look at the clip, they'll see what I was trying to say. But message to self: be a bit smarter with language.
It makes sense, I think, to say that things can be taken out of context. I understand that. I think that a lot of young people, and I think generally as a public response, we had the kind of the report that came out. I think it was in November, from the Human Rights Equality Commission. You acknowledged the you acknowledged the findings of that report, and you said, yes, these are damning. This is to the anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. So you've mentioned come 2024, perhaps there'll be measures in place to address that and any other forms of inequality. But are there perhaps more specific things? I mean, we've seen pictures of you kneeling, you've just said now on the chat, Black Lives Matter. But beyond the kind of the physical gestures and the words, what kind of policy-wise or kind of, conversation-wise, what does that look like within the Labour Party?
Well, a number of things. Firstly, we're doing a lot of work on diversity at the Labour Party, and we've got a diversity board for the first time. I was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. We had 7,000 staff there, and we had a 5-year strategy for dealing with racial representation, proper representation. And David Lammy did a report on disproportionality in the criminal justice system. And he said that the Crown Prosecution Service, when in the 5 years I was leading, became the most diverse of all the criminal justice agencies. So this can be done, and there's a track record of doing it. In addition to that, I think the number of reports we've now got stacked up on a shelf about disproportionate incomes is I don't know how high. So every time the question's been asked about disproportionality of representation on boards, in pay, in criminal justice, we get the same results, which show this is a structural problem. But a lot of those recommendations haven't been carried out. When the government did the impact assessment into COVID, lots and lots of Black community leaders were saying to me, for heaven's sake, here, challenge the government to implement the recommendations they've already made before they start making any more. And we took that up at Prime Minister's question. So, Munya, there's a lot going on. I've also got Doreen Lawrence as my race advisor, who's fantastic. And I've been working with Doreen for a very, very long time. And she, as you know, did a report into COVID and with very strong recommendations about what we need to do next. But, and I'm open to all sorts of other suggestions. This is part of the point of tonight, the chat, the challenge. I actually, if people challenge me and say you need to go further on this, I take that away and have a look at it.
Yeah, and I just need to push because we've got to do the Q&A. But just
Sorry.
want to come back to no, don't say sorry, because this is a fantastic conversation and I never want to rush. But it echoes a lot of what MLK said before. We can't wait. There seems to be a lot of language of we can't do this quick enough. We have been slow to do such and such. And so if young people, if you've logged on tonight and you're like, come on, we've got to move. There's lots of power in your hands, as there is in those who are in powers of positions and influence and whatnot. So young people, please do not be disheartened by this. If anything, it should be an encouragement to say those ideas you want to get going, those things you want to go and do. Listen to what Keir's saying. Yeah, we need those solutions. And if you don't join in that conversation, it's only going to set us back even more. And so to wrap up this question, before we head over to the Q&A, and Munya, I know you're waiting to ask up Fiona. Fiona, we're going to you, by the way, sis. So be ready with your question. We're coming to you for the Q&A. But we have to talk about climate change, because this is a huge conversation that young people absolutely care about. And so to wrap this up, and Keir, I just have to push you for a quick answer before we dive into the Q&A. A lot of us will be watching and thinking about how can we do life at a local and individual level, and whose responsibility is it to save our planet? That is a big question, but I wondered if you could give us a quick answer.
Yeah, it's all of us, and we've got to do the big stuff on the international stage, and we've got to do the stuff locally. And two examples of that: Paris Agreement is really vital, and I'm so pleased that President Biden and Vice President Harris are committed to the Paris Agreement. We need to strengthen that because there's no answer to climate change that isn't international. So we should be leading on the international stage on that. The UK should be right up there with our voice on that. Back to the very local, and to give you examples, in Camden, we've done a lot of work on air pollution and issues that can really make a difference to people on the ground, where everybody can contribute to it, because it is all our responsibility. You know, we are on this planet for a short time, and we have to hand it on to those that come afterwards, and huge damage has been done. I think one of the big, amongst the mistakes coming out of the financial crash in 2010 was we took our eye off the climate change issue and probably lost a decade, and we can't afford to do that again. But globally and locally, it has to be there. And I think, you know, green principles have to be hardwired into everything that we do. I mean, I would like to see an incoming Labour government. I know we can't wait for that, but we can push it on this government, where we say, for each policy, really, not what is the cost of this in economic terms, but also what impact does this policy have on climate change as a sort of key indicator as to how we benchmark our policies. I think there's a lot can be done.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I know so many of you are in the comments very, very passionate about climate change. And so, yeah, rightly so. We're going to hand over to the young people, because this event is for you guys. And we really want to hear your voices. So, Munya, without further ado, I think Fiona is waiting to fire her question.
Fiona? Oh, as in, wait, I'm looking at about 99 questions. Let me just see quick. Oh, okay, Fiona, I got it.
Fiona, we can see you.
Fiona.
Hi, Munya. Hi, Swarzy. And hi,
Fiona's
Tina.
here. Sorry, Fiona.
Yeah. Hi, Fiona. Nice to see you.
Hi. Thank you. Nice to see you too. And I've really enjoyed tonight's conversation. You've raised some really good points. My question is that, given that young people felt isolated, unsupported, and overlooked in the transition to lockdown life, what plans would you like to see in place to ensure young people receive adequate mental health support in the transition to a new normal life?
Yeah, Fiona, it's a really good question, because as I said at the outset, I've been really struck by the impact this pandemic has had on young people and their mental health, more than I had expected. And I think a number of things need to happen. We need much more provision for mental health. We don't take it seriously enough. It isn't on a par with physical health, and many more people have mental health issues than we imagine, and we need to acknowledge that. I think there's been a particular problem in the pandemic. I'd like to see some signposting of existing services for young people, so people know where to go, because I was struck by the number of people who did need or wanted to reach out but didn't quite know where to go with it. And I'd like to see the services themselves much more targeted at young people and where they are and where their needs are. But I think we need to talk about it a lot more as well. I don't think we've acknowledged just what a deep impact this has had on all of us, but I think particularly on young people who, in a sense, have borne the brunt of a lot of the last 10 years, I think. I mean, I think in the austerity years and the cuts to public services, young people really took the brunt of that. They're taking the brunt of the economic hit now because of the pandemic. And we need to do a lot more to support them and their mental health.
Yeah.
It helps to talk about it as well, actually. I was, in the group discussions we had with young people, there was something powerful about the fact that we're talking to each other about it. And I suppose that'd be the last thing to say. We need to be honest with each other about it and support each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and the point that you make about talking about it is so key. Yeah, thank you for your answer. And Fiona, thank you for your question. Thank you so much, sis, for getting involved. I'm going to go to Arik next. Arik, I know you're waiting in the backstage wing, ready to fire up your questions. So off you go.
Hi, Arik.
Hi, Keir, and well done, Mette, on organising this. My question is, the World Health Organization has described the pandemic as taking place at the same time as an infodemic, with online misinformation being blamed for low vaccine uptake, especially amongst people of colour. The issue has also come under the spotlight in the US, with social media platforms banning Donald Trump. What do you think should be done about online misinformation, and do you think the social media platforms were right to ban a democratically elected head of state?
Yeah, I think there are two things we need to distinguish. There are some people who are putting complete disinformation out there, and that is going to cost lives. And I think that is a terrible thing to happen in the middle of a pandemic. We just hit 100,000. The last thing we need is for more people to die. And some of the anti-vax stuff is misinformation, and it will lead to people losing their lives if we don't do something about it. So what I've said, Arik, to the Prime Minister is, if you want to bring forward legislation to force these platforms to take down that material, we will back you on it, because it is possible to have this misinformation taken down, and we should take it down, in my view. But it is equally, so that's one part of the argument, and I feel strongly about that. It needs to be done quickly, and it could be done. We could probably get legislation through Parliament in a couple of days. That shouldn't be confused with some people and some communities, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, having, if you like, a lesser degree of trust in some of the groups, the individuals handing out the vaccine, etc. That is about something different. And there, I think there's a different approach, which is working with different communities to give people confidence. There was I don't know whether you saw it, there's a cross-party Black and Asian and minority ethnic MPs did a joint video today to try to give people confidence in the vaccine. I went to Newham Vaccine Hub 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there are lots of people in the communities giving confidence to people. So it's two different things, Rick. I've come down hard on the deliberate misinformation, and I then work equally hard on giving people confidence to have the vaccine, people who, for very understandable reasons, wouldn't necessarily think that this is something they'd want to trust immediately and without further confidence. And we mustn't get the two mixed up, I think, otherwise we make a big mistake. On Trump, I mean, I think, it was a good thing that he was denied the platform in the end. It took a while. And so I do think that's right. I think, and again, young people need to be part of this discussion. There is a question, though, about the power that puts in the hands of those that control the platform. And we need to be careful with that because there are voices that do need to be heard. And I don't want to go down the route of big platform controllers basically having more of a control over what we say. But as for Trump, I'm very glad to see the back of him, if I may say so.
I'm sure he's watching this, so
Yeah, we've just lost one viewer. I think that might have been him.
We've only got time for one last question, I'm afraid. We need to do part 2, don't you worry. But Munya, I'm sure we've got time for one last question.
Yes, introducing the most marvellous Kira next.
What an intro.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, Kira.
Spectacular wall decorations as well.
Just want to say this conversation is absolutely brilliant. So my question is, young people make up 25% of the UK population, yet only a handful of young people are in a decision-making position. What future plans are in place to close this gap and ensure young people are proportionately represented in politics?
Oh, Kira, what a great one to end with, because there's a disconnect, I think, between politicians and young people. I don't think there's a disconnect between politics and young people, because all the young people I talk to have got very, very strong views on politics, but there's a disconnect between politicians and young people. And the way to close that gap is to get more young people into politics, into decision-making roles. I'd do that. I can think of two ways to do that off the top of my head. The first is I've been a strong believer in votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. And the sooner that we give young people the ability to actually change politics by voting, the better. And if by voting, they can look at politicians, including me, and say, if you're not good enough, then make room for somebody else, and we're going to vote for somebody else, or whatever it may be. The other thing is, so on the one hand, the vote. The other thing I'd say is, really champion young people who are active in politics and doing. Look at Mete, for example, who's done brilliant work on this tonight, but is a young politician. And people look to that and say, actually, if you want decision makers, promote. Nadia Whittome is one of our MPs, really, really good. And then in Camden, Nazir Ali was our first and youngest Black British Bangladeshi mayor. And that was fantastic. If we point to those examples, then that really, really changes people's perception and closes that disconnect.
Kira, thank you so much for such a good question to end on as well. And Kira, thank you for your answer. I was going to butt in and be like, oh, we've only got a minute left, but you did amazingly. So I didn't need to, jump in. We have actually only got 5 minutes until the end of our event. And before we go, we definitely need to go back to our poll and reveal the results of the poll question that we were talking about. So if you've just joined us, welcome. You need to run this one back because you need to see the poll that we were talking about at the beginning of the event. But we've been talking about the third lockdown. So, Munya, can you reveal our results, please? The question was, how has the latest lockdown affected you? And the results are...
So, in first place, the most effective thing was my social life, which I can completely understand. I'm currently self-isolating with a plant, so I get that. Second of all, my mental health. And then in third place, I believe, is my job. So hopefully we've discussed most of that in today's discussion, I hope.
Yeah.
Swarzy, I think that I'm trying to remember, but I think last time mental health came top when we did this together, you and me.
Yeah.
You've probably done it with other people, but I think last time mental health came top.
Yeah, it did. And to be fair, at the beginning of the event, you both guys were talking about, missing people and human contact. And that is a huge part of our mental health being stable, right? Seeing people, hearing people, seeing people face to face. And so to know that the event that we did in June, July last year and the event that we're doing today, however many months later, it is the same results coming up. So guys, thank you so much to all the young people who have got involved this evening through the Q&A, through the tweets, through the hashtag, however you guys have got involved to really prep our questions for tonight's conversation. We cannot say thank you enough.
And Swarzy, I got to jump in. This will be 10 seconds. So it hit me as soon as we started the chat. Keir, you said you went to the Caribbean, you went to Africa. Obviously, people want to kind of get to know the kind of guy you are. Could you handle the spice of the food?
Yes, I love it. And the more spice,
what's your go-to order then?
Yeah, although I don't know if I've got time, but a very, very, very quick story. One of the people I represented had poisoned someone with some curry, allegedly. And all went well. They got released from prison. And they said, how can I thank you? They said, can I invite you for dinner? I said, well, on this occasion. But the spice is great. I mean, Caribbean food is fantastic. I mean, I've probably been to Caribbean 50 times for work.
Yeah, and that lovely jerky flavour.
It's brilliant, absolutely fantastic.
You do know that you've just given Munya the next sketch, don't you, Keir? You do know you've just set him up very nicely to see what...
I'll tell you the full story behind that one when we get a moment.
Guys, if you ever needed to end on a note, that was it. We have to say a massive thank you to Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you so much for your time, for your questions, for your honesty as well, and just for joining us again. This is the second event that we've held together, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Swarzy. Thank you, Munya, and thank you, Mete, and the whole team behind this, Swarzy, who put this on tonight. It's been brilliant to do it again. if I behave, I hope you'll get me on again, because I've really enjoyed it, and I am going to look at all the chat stuff and the Q&A, because I went through that myself last time and we did some extra follow-on questions. Just because I want people to feel that if they've got an opinion that they want me to hear, I want them to feel that I want to hear it, and I will look into that box and we'll go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Please send in your questions. That's a great shout. Munya, thank you so much for bringing joy. Listen, what's next for you, man? What are you gonna do in the next 30 seconds?
Turn that lamp off so it stopped reflecting off my forehead, I think.
Your background is very clean. It feels very like you're
that is my Tinder bio, the shiniest forehead in the game. But no, thanks for having me, Swarzy. Good to meet you, Keir. And yeah, do it again soon.
We have to do it again. This is the end of our first, well, not the first, but of many question times that we're going to be hosting all the way through this quarantine, this lockdown. So please follow us on the socials at My Life, My Say. Be part of the conversation. And until next time, we'll see you very, very soon. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.